On the 4th of July in 1978, while retrieving his brother from a friend's house, young David goes on an unexpected journey. But even though it would be every kid's dream to travel through space and time, the journey he really discovers is a love he has for his family, especially his brother. Navigators. Tonight we travel the stars back to 1986 when we first met Max and his amazing spaceship as we remake Flight of the Navigator right. Hello, my fellow cinematic architects, and welcome to Remake This Movie Right. We are a member of the Hollywood Outsider Network, and with podcasts available in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and on our website at remakethismovieright.com. Remake This Movie Right is a podcast that attempts to make a movie with a remake already in the works, sometimes, and discuss how we would do it, and then present it to all of you in movie trailer form. We are here today to tell Hollywood how to remake this movie right. Now, because Aaron doesn't like space, time travel, or robots, or just because he felt I was best to pilot us on this journey, I, Troy Heinrichs, will be one of your navigators this evening, and joining me on this 20-mile mission in 35 seconds is none other than recurring remake navigator, Mr. Scotty Clark.
What is going on, Troy?
Hey, this will be fun. We get to pick on Aaron without him being here.
I know, because you think he's going to listen to it?
Oh, no, because he hasn't even watched the movie yet.
Yeah, I know. I loaned him my copy in preparation for the show, and he never watched it. I had to actually go get it back from him so I could watch it and to do it for myself. So
yeah, and per our remake rules, you have to at least have watched the movie, watched it twice, and then of course be a fan of it. And Aaron doesn't qualify for any of those, so he's sitting on the sidelines. And you may remember her from another part of the cosmos recently from our Stargate episode. Welcome back, Navigator Angela Wallach.
Hello, fellas.
How are you, Angela?
I am great.
Are you ready to travel through space once again?
Oh, I am.
All the way 4.4 solar hours from here, right?
Mm-hmm. Phelan it is.
Phelan it is. And if you haven't told by now, we are tackling the 1986, still certified fresh by Disney-backed movie. That is right, The Flight of the Navigator. This was an American science fiction adventure film directed by Randall Kleiser and written by Mark H. Baker and Michael Burton. The film starred Joey Kramer as David Freeman, a 12-year-old boy who is abducted by an alien spaceship and finds himself caught in a world that has changed around him. Ooh, mysterious. So what are some of your favorite memories of this, just off the top of your head, Scott? Why don't you go ahead and just shoot some out there?
For me, the number one memory of this movie is actually seeing this in the theater, because I have kind of a bit of a history of not seeing a lot of movies as a kid. Because of my upbringing, and for some reason I got to see this movie. I don't know why. I still to this day don't understand it. But yeah, I was 6 years old when this came out, and I remember really wanting to see it extremely bad. And we went to the theater, and my mom decided at the last minute that we were not going to see Flight of the Navigator, that we were going to see Top Gun instead. And as a 6-year-old kid, I think I did the temper tantrum thing, and I was really, really upset. So I don't remember when it was that I got to go actually see this in the theater, but I did, and I will never forget it, because it's one I've not only seen in the theater, but I've seen multiple times in the theater, because I remember just being blown away by it. And then when it hit video, I must have rented this movie enough times for us to have actually bought multiple copies time and time again. This is my number one favorite movie when I was a kid for years. It was the one I always wanted to watch. I never got tired of it. And even as an adult, Angela is actually a personal friend of mine, and we used to work at Blockbuster together back in the day. Well, after the movie was on, was released to home viewing, she and I used to get together and do movie nights with our our preview copies that we got as employees and watch them together. And then we started doing themed movie nights every once in a while. And one night we decided to have a sci-fi movie night, and we watched Flight of the Navigator and then Tron right afterwards. It's just amazing to me that this movie still holds up to me. And just as a kid, the spaceship was cool. The music was great. Traveling through time was an awesome concept that we didn't get too much of that early in my years. And just so many fantastic memories from watching it. Even my dad, who made me sit through the credits of this movie, where they're flying through the clouds during the credits. And I just have good memories of my dad being impressed by that and saying, hey, no, sit down and watch these credits. And it feels like we're flying through the clouds at the end of this movie. And I'll never forget that.
The big question is, because I believe you were on our Last Starfighter remake as well, Scott. If you had to choose Last Starfighter versus Flight of the Navigator, which one would you pick to be on a desert island with you?
Hands down, Flight of the Navigator. I seriously, the Last Starfighter is a little bit more campy and silly, like on purpose. This one is trying to be a serious movie, and it's bogged down by some of its age. But I think it really still holds up. It looks really solid, and I don't have any issues watching it. I know I'm watching it with nostalgia glasses, but immensely enjoyable.
First impressions of Navigator for you, Angela?
This is one I did not see in the movie theater. We didn't go to movies that much when I was little anyways, but my first memory of watching it was watching it on the Disney Channel with my mom and my brother. That's kind of cool because it's one of those movies where not only a little girl, but also an older brother and my mother all enjoyed it. It's just one of those things where I vividly remember us like all sitting down together, like eating dinner in front of the TV, because that's what we did, and watching the movie. And I remember it was, back in VCR days. So we videotaped it off the Disney Channel. And so we had a copy that was just a cheap copy from off the Disney Channel. And we watched that movie so many times. We actually broke the tape. Legit broke the tape eventually. So then I remember we finally, like one Christmas, my mom actually got it for us on VHS or whatever and watched it a lot. And then, as we got older, one of my other favorite memories with this movie was actually sharing it with my niece and nephews when they were little. I remember watching it with them, and it does. I mean, yeah, it's 1986 film, but the story still holds up, and it doesn't. And I love The Last Starfighter too, just to compare. This doesn't have, like, when looking back in it, it doesn't give the feel of as dated as looking back at The Last Starfighter. So I just think the core story is good. And this was one of my favorites too. It was one of the, fun thing that Scott and I both kind of bonded over, like our love of this movie. I mean, I put this up there for me, it's up there with Goonies, Never Ending Story, and Short Circuit. So those were my movies. And so this was right up there.
I got to ask you, Angela, you said you taped it off of the Disney Channel. So did you do the thing whenever you watched it or where you watch it now and you know where all the commercial breaks are?
I kind of do. Memory? I do. Like there was one when I was watching it the other day in preparation, there was one part. It was actually the part, I think there was like a commercial right before or after like the spaceship, like I said, when we were talking earlier, when the spaceship is pushed or whatever by the guy, like there's usually a break right after that. Mm-hmm. So sad.
I have so many movies like that where I just remember, I know where the commercials are supposed to go because I watched it taped off of TV.
Well, I think it's funny that you guys are saying, oh, it's as good as like Goonies or a few of those other ones that you mentioned, but I don't know if it was that high on the list. I remember as a kid, it was definitely one that I was super excited to watch because for some reason it was just this whimsical of the time travel and the space and the little creatures that they had to go get. And I know that was the thing that was kind of the big draw. But then you watched it recently, I shared it with my children, and they were kind of like, yeah, it was a good movie, but they weren't really like super stoked on it. There are some things I think in it that do give it a little bit of a dated feel.
Oh, totally.
Starsky and Hutch reference for sure, and things of that nature.
I was dated by that point, really.
That's true. That is true. But yeah, all in all, it's a fun movie. I think that it definitely deserves a kind of reskinning, a retelling, if you will, was in the works at one point. We'll get into that in a little bit. And then, of course, we'll share our ideas of how we think it could be done, since we are obviously huge fans of the film. But for those that aren't big fans of the film or have not seen the film or have no idea what the hell we're talking about tonight, a little recap here for you. It was the night of July 4th, 1978 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, when 12-year-old David Scott Freeman walks through the woods to pick up his 8-year-old younger brother Jeff from a friend's house when he accidentally falls into a ravine and is knocked unconscious. When he comes to, he discovered that it is now the year 1986. While he hasn't aged at all, his parents are now middle-aged. Jeff is 16 years old. Meanwhile, an alien spaceship crashes through power lines and is promptly confiscated by NASA. David is taken to a hospital for tests, but is sent to a NASA research facility when his brainwaves reveal images of a spaceship. Dr. Louis Faraday, who has been studying the spaceship since its arrival, discovers that David's mind is filled with alien technical manuals and star charts covering expanses of the galaxy far exceeding anything humans have recorded. David's subconscious mind tells a scientist that he was taken to a planet called Phalon, 560 light years away in just over 4.4 hours. So with that, we're going to share a little clip with you. This one will be fun. Here's your first snippet from Flight of the Navigator.
David, what time did you enter the woods?
Around 8 o'clock.
Then what happened?
Then I reached this cliff.
It's transmitting in alpha waves with complex frequency patterns in them.
I know I fell.
It's 1986, man. 8 years since that night. This is totally rad. I mean, you're my big little brother.
I think you should take a look at this. Where did this come from? From the mind of a 12-year-old boy?
All right, we always like to do here on the show, we do a little bit of trivia. I thought these were kind of fun. Scotty actually knows a few of these, I'm sure, from being on the Hollywood Outsider. But we were talking about Starsky and Hutch, and did you know that director Randall Kaiser started off in episodic television doing episodes such as the series The Rookies and, would you guessed it, Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah, that was a really cool callback.
Nice.
He actually, before graduating through TV movies like The Boy in the Plastic Bubble to the big time with the massive smash hit Grease in 1978, you can actually hear You're the One That I Want in the beginning of the movie when the parents and David arrive at the house.
Ah, little Easter egg there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a fun one that he was also George Lucas's roommate when they studied together at USC. So that might be where he got his international interstellar travel concepts potentially.
So the question is who rubbed off on who in college?
That's true. That is true. Now, for those that ever wondered why Max sounds like Pee Wee Herman, it's because it is Pee Wee Herman. Yes, Paul Reubens actually does play the voice of Max.
Does he play the non-goofy version as well? Like it's him even when he's like super serious, just like with an effect on?
According to
It's all him.
IMDb credits, yeah, totally.
It's so hard to hear that and think that's Paul Reubens. I mean, it's obviously him when after he downloads David's brain and takes with him all the his 12-year-old self as well, and gets super. He even does the Pee Wee Herman laugh a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's talking super serious and being very serious, Navigator, we must get out of here. It's like that doesn't sound like Paul Reubens at all to me. I mean, it's got to obviously have some kind of vocal effect on him, but I sat through the whole viewing of this trying to figure out if I could pick up any little thing that sounded Pee Wee Herman-ish, and I couldn't. I mean, I believe it's him, but it's very a different voice for sure.
Well, and you remember during was a Big Adventure when he's the bellhop or whatever in the movie at the end, and he's like, "Paging Mr. Herman, Mr. Herman." You don't even think that that's his voice coming out at that point too. So he does a really great job of disguising his voice in different ways.
Totally.
And I have to admit, I seriously was like picking on the movie for the longest time over the last 20 some years because I thought they were ripping off of Pee Wee Herman. And I first knew just the other day for the first time ever that it was Paul Reubens as the character.
Really?
Never bothered.
I thought that was common knowledge.
Never bothered to look it up.
Well, it's like I said, he's credited as Paul Mall. And did you also know that the director who did Flight of the Navigator actually directed Big Top Pee-wee?
Oh.
Yeah.
There's one for you.
They don't know, like people still don't really get why Paul Reubens went under that name because he had been doing Pee Wee Herman, like I believe since the mid to late 70s. So it's not like this voice and this character wasn't something that he was already known for. So it's kind of interesting that he was credited under a different name.
Stuff you learn every day. Also, did you know that the music that plays when we first see inside the spaceship itself is actually a lot like the music that played in the Space Mountain Q back in Disneyland Anaheim back in the day. The ship also appeared on the Space Mountain Q video.
I believe the ship itself, like the prop that was used is on top of or at one point was on top of a building in Disney, like in Epcot or something like that. It was
one of the restaurants, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the bottom half of it was flipped over.
Yep,
that's cool.
I totally want to go just to see that. I doubt it's still there, but it's so iconic to me in my childhood.
The best part was that my kids, when they watched it, watching the special effects on the stairs coming down, they were like, how did they do that? It's like liquid metal. That's so cool. And for that time, it probably actually was.
Yeah, totally. It still doesn't look bad though.
No, I think that effect held up really well.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Now, they're flying around all over the place, and in order to let the audience know that they were back in the Florida area at the Phillips station where they stop to use the payphone, you can actually see the two kids coming out of the car checking out the spaceship in a Miami Vice t-shirt and an Epcot Center t-shirt, which had just opened in Disney World.
Was it really a question that they were in Florida, though? Didn't they come down and say, hey, we're Big Al's Gator Town or whatever, and we must be in Florida? Was it really a question?
Apparently, they figured out a way to work it in there, so maybe the Al's Gator was part of it, too, to make sure people understood, yes, we are back, after we were zipping all over the place.
We're not in Tokyo anymore.
Everyone loves math, so when Max and David escape the NASA facility, they do travel precisely 20 miles from point of origin in 35 seconds, which would make their speed about 2,057 miles per hour. That's fast.
So when they hit that jarring stop, I think there would have been some shattered bones. He wasn't really harnessed in that thing at all.
Well, remember, seatbelts were optional back then when we were growing up, Scott.
Oh, that's true. You kind of lay in the back seat of the station wagon or the back window of the car,
which they actually did in the opening part of the movie.
Yep, totally.
That was the first thing I said to my kids. I was like, "Yep, that's how we rode."
Yep, exactly.
She looked at me. She's like, "That's so not safe, Dad."
They're programmed well.
Also sending like a 12-year-old in the middle of the night to go get his 8-year-old brother walking alone, like in the woods that part cracked me up too. Like that totally wouldn't happen nowadays. You would not have an 8-year-old walk in the woods.
Especially over the train tracks.
Over the train tracks.
And a ravine.
Not like anybody's listened to Stand By Me or seen Stand By Me anytime recently.
Right.
Also, a little bit more math. David's flight to Phelan, there and back, took 4.4 solar hours, according to the movie, while 8 years had passed on Earth, indicating that time was slowed down to go with the scientific theory from Albert Einstein. So that it slows down David by a factor of about 16,000, which, when you do the math, corresponds to a speed of about 99.99998% the speed of light. So good on them for getting the math
pretty darn close.
Mm-hmm.
Nice job.
That is oddly specific, and they didn't want to get fact checked. Apparently, huh?
Apparently. And finally, both Cliff DeYoung and Veronica Cartwright, who play David's parents, later appear in the X-Files, the TV show which is centered around, of course, extraterrestrials and their technology.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Should also mention that Veronica Cartwright was also the lady who was on Alien that was screaming during the chestbuster scene. For those that do not know.
Oh my gosh, that totally is her.
It is her.
It is
my
her.
God. I never made that connection until just this very second. That's awesome. It's better than not recognizing Pee Wee Herman, but yeah, I feel kind of dumb.
Troy.
Rub it in. Rub it in. I should also mention that recently Veronica Cartwright was on another kind of supernatural show. She was on Resurrection on ABC within the recent years, and I actually interviewed Veronica Cartwright.
Cool.
That's pretty sweet.
We had a real fun chat with her. It was really awesome. So you can check that out at resurrectionrevealed.com to hear a little bit Veronica Cartwright, where we actually talk about some special ties she has to this character in particular.
Oh, so you did talk about Flight of Navigator with her?
Oh, absolutely. Got to bring it up.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Totally.
That's super awesome.
Hey, I got one other quick one, Troy. In the movie when he sees all the little creatures that Max has been collecting, and he kind of goes through all the different names and everything.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. He makes mention that first off, I believe that this is Lasseter's first entry that he did under the Disney name, if I'm not mistaken, and that actually ties in well with this because when he's describing all these creatures, one of them is from the Pixar galaxy or something like that. So this movie is technically the first mention of the word Pixar, which obviously became later on a huge animation studio within Disney. So I thought that was kind of cool.
That is great.
To tie into Pixar, you know that in WALL-E, which is my favorite Pixar movie, the robot that's kind of taking over the spaceship and control, did you notice how much he looks like Max?
Oh, Otto. Yeah. Otto, the
he looks
autopilot.
like Max. It was done on purpose. I think intentionally he was supposed to kind of mirror the way that Max looked like from Flight of the Navigator.
Very good call.
I like that movie a little bit more now.
Mm-hmm.
I also think Otto's eyeball, the red eyeball inside of that, was more for Hal, but That's just me. I'm old school 2001. Let's talk a little bit about the original. What makes the movie so notable? Favorite moments, crazy ideas, things of that nature. What was it, Angela, that said, hey, I really enjoyed this movie, but there was this one specific part of it that really was what connected with me when I was growing up as a kid?
Yeah, there was a lot. First of all, I do have to say, looking at it now as an adult, one of the things that I appreciate even more is the actors who did play his parents, like you said, Clifton Young and Veronica Cartwright. I just felt like they really, even now, look like a real married couple and just look like your typical average mom and dad. I don't know. I just really connected with them like more, I think, as an adult. And I don't even have kids of my own. I just felt like they played it so well. I really enjoyed them. But for me, favorite moments, things that definitely bring me back. The opening sequence with the dogs and the Frisbees and the 80s synthesized music. I mean, I love the Frisbees, the play on a UFO and, it zooms in and everything like that. That part just cracks me up and kind of just gives you the feel of what the movie, I don't know, it just creates an environment that's totally 80s.
Have you ever seen a silver Frisbee? I don't think I ever have inside this movie.
No, but I loved it. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was great.
I totally want one now. So that part I loved. Obviously anything with Ralph, the mail carrying robot delivery. I forgot. I used to know what the actual Ralph stood for. I don't know if any of you guys know what those stand for, but I totally love Ralph. And I really imagined as a kid, I remember imagining NASA having things like that. And at least in my mind, that's what I pictured NASA as. NASA had robots that were delivering things, mail and everything. So I always thought that was really cool, even though it probably wasn't accurate. One of my favorite scenes was actually the scene when they're flying away and David makes him stop and because he has to go to the bathroom. And so the spaceship is just out there and David's, outside of the spaceship and there's cows. And I love that Max moves to the cows like he's talking to him, which cracked me up. But also probably my favorite line from the movie is when Max had just been insulting David for, being basically dumb. He was calling him an inferior. And David's figured out that Max needs him for the star charts that are in his head. And it's when he says, you need me and my inferior brain to fly that thing. And Max says, correction, I need the superior information in your inferior brain to fly this thing. That's just totally Paul Rubin. So funny to me. So I love that. And
on top of that, he said something like, I don't leak, Navigator, you leak, remember?
Yes, yeah. Totally love that. And then obviously, when Max starts acting like a 12-year-old after the mind transfer, that's when it gets really humorous. And
that's it, Davey.
Davey.
Don't forget to feed Bruiser.
So, those are some of my favorites. And then obviously I know somebody's going to mention Puck Murrin, so I won't talk about that too much, although I want one now and I wanted one then. So those are some of my favorites.
Yeah, it was a robotic assistant labor facilitator.
Thank you. I used to know that. That's really sad. Or not sad. That's pretty awesome.
For me, my number one moment in this movie is the first time that the spacecraft actually exits the NASA facility. And he's like, take us out of here. After they've gone straight up and they've come back down, he said, no, I meant along the ground. And that thing, first off, it doesn't look aerodynamic at all. It just looks like a ball with a couple of points or ripples on it. But when that thing transforms and just kind of morphs into this awesome, tip of an arrow with a rounded back on it or something, with this shiny luster on it with reflective nature, that was the coolest thing my 6-year-old eyes had ever seen up to that point. It was just so freaking cool. Just ripping across, and they obviously had to have done it with, taking a camera with a a helicopter or plane or something, and then just sped it up to make it was going that much faster. But it just looks so cool, just kind of tilting from side to side as it was going along. It's just no big deal, but everything is just rushing past it. That was so awesome. I wanted one so bad when I was a kid. That's my number one moment. But that and just the nature of being a 12-year-old kid that gets to do this, that gets to fly in this thing and control it and go to Tokyo in 20 minutes. I mean, it's just stuff that you wanted to do when you were 6 or 12 years old. It was awesome. And plus just the introduction to this story. David wakes up in a ravine and goes to knock on his house, and it's not his home anymore. Like, there's some old people living there, and they did a really good job at the beginning of setting up his bedroom and seeing how it looked when he was there in 1978. So you were very familiar with the room, very familiar with the staircase, and then when you come back and it's now occupied by this elderly couple that, the guys turned it into like a reading den or something. The family has obviously moved out. That was like an eerie moment as a kid, like, coming home and where are your parents? You have no idea what's going on. And that mystery at the beginning, when you have no idea what's going on, the first time you see it was genuinely interesting. I loved it.
Not to mention,
yeah, that's a really scary, I was just going to say, they just played into what kids would be afraid of, because that would be terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Coming home and like your family's gone. How scary is that? That's super terrifying.
Not to mention the old guy with a smoking jacket on going, "What's wrong, son?"
Yeah, because he was trying to like keep him calm, but we're getting a little never-ending story there. I like children.
It sure came across really creepy when I watched it recently.
And to piggyback on what Angela said about the frisbees looking like UFOs at the beginning, like immediately after, when the family is leaving this dog catching frisbee competition, you get like this huge shadow that just goes over the whole place. And, if this is the first time you're going into the movie, you know it's about aliens. And at that point, all we really knew about alien movies so much was in a negative sense. Aliens taking over, invading or something like that. So when you have this huge shadow go over, you're thinking, all right, here we go. Alien invasion's coming. Here's the spaceship coming in over across the area here. And nope, it's just a Goodyear blimp. Mm-hmm. that was kind of funny. Just like a little bit of misdirection between that and the UFOs was a lot of fun.
Or that really brief moment when he comes by the water tower in the woods. And the water tower, I swear to this day, the first time you see the water tower, it is the ship. And then when it comes back again, it's the water tower.
Yep. That was cool.
It was so fast. Couldn't believe if it was actually there or not.
And it was a really creepy walk in the woods too, anyway, because he's genuinely freaked out. Like, kudos on Joey Kramer for selling that, because he looked freaked out, and he kept like, "Get back, Jack! I got a gun," which is like the lamest thing to say. It's going to scare somebody off.
Yeah, at least pull the trigger, make a sound, so they know you actually have it.
Pew pew.
Well, it was Star Wars.
That's how
right?
I shoot.
He's got laser blasters.
Pew, pew, pew. Yeah.
It was that era.
What about you, Troy? Did we leave anything for you?
Man, it's just so weird watching it a second time now recently. The transition you get in this movie from the front half to the back half. The front half is really deep and mysterious, and he's locked up in NASA, and Sarah Jessica Parker comes and visits with her purple hair. I always thought that was funny. The whole what is this stuff on TV? It's like, you've never seen a music video before. And it was like, yeah, and pretty much nobody had ever since then either, because they disappeared so quickly.
Yep.
It was just really interesting watching it again, because I always remembered the fun, Beach Boys song and cruising around, but I didn't realize how much that front half was so dark initially. That just the creeping through the woods, and like you said, the scene with the old man and the lady at the house, and getting all the stuff taped up to his head, and I think it was interesting because it had a lot of places it could have gone, and then it almost feels like Disney did the Disney thing, where it was like, okay, we have to make this fun and humorous, otherwise it's going to be too bad, not fit our audience skew at the time. So for me, I think the biggest fun part was of course just the bond between the brothers, and that you have this whole setup of we're going to go shoot off the fireworks, and that his room's like hasn't been touched since he left except for the move, and they have that same exact box of fireworks from 1978 that they used to do the signal at the end of the movie. I always thought that was fascinating. Like, those fireworks are really going to get set off 8 years later. I would assume it would blow up in the guy's hand.
Well, not only that, but they moved. So they actually kept a room for him at the new house. So they genuinely never moved on from his disappearance, which is, I can't decide if it's really sweet or kind of creepy.
It's just sad.
Yeah. Definitely sad.
It does explain why those first few didn't go. How many did he fire off before he finally got one to go?
Well, he's doing it wrong, first of all. It's a bottle rocket. You got to put it in a bottle to shoot it out. You can't just stick it in your shingles and expect it to go anywhere.
And plus, when have you ever seen a bottle rocket explode like that?
Right.
in the sky. The bottle rockets were like a tiny little, and that was it. It was never like a real firework. Although it was the 80s, so who knows what they got away with then.
So what about things that don't work anymore for you, Scott? What are the things that you just go, that was not so good at all?
Really, there's not a whole lot that doesn't work for me. And I know that is a lot of the nostalgia.
It's a cliche for you.
Is it?
Like, I'm just the happy Scott Clark. I like all video games.
Yeah, I know. Right. But
there's got to be one thing that you didn't like.
Well, in just the 80s tone. Don't get me wrong. I grew up in the 80s. You know, that's the majority of my childhood was there. But I like I do with anytime we do a remake or talk about remakes and for modern audiences, I want a modern audience to enjoy this as much as I did when I was a kid. And like you said, you showed this to your kids and they're like, yeah, it was pretty cool, but it wasn't anything that stood out. It needs to be updated in terms of making it appeal to this generation or maybe even further generations. I love the music. I've had the music in my head all day long today. I'm at work teaching kids and I got I can't get out of my head. I love it. But you show that music to a kid today and they just roll their eyes and think and look at you like you're weird. I mean, you know, the clothes and the glasses that Jeff wears are ridiculous. They're so huge. As much as I love the couple, like Angela mentioned, I thought they're a great couple, but they're a great 80s couple. That dude's hair, holy cow. It just, he's got a receding hair cul-de-sac going on with like party in the front, cul-de-sac in the back, or I don't know, but yeah, just make it modern so it doesn't feel like an 80s movie is my big thing.
What about you, Angela?
Angela, what about you?
I like it that it's in the 80s and it looks like the 80s. So, but I'll talk about that when we go to like the remake. But the things that I definitely think need improvement, the special effects. Obviously, we can make things look better now than back then, especially with just like the flying. I also think like the mind transfer scene. That just seemed like so easy. You know, he just like lays down on the floor and the mind transfer is done. There's nothing really cool about that. So I definitely think that could look better now. The alien creatures could look a lot better. Some of them, they looked, as an adult, looking back, they look pretty cheesy. So I definitely think like with, I keep thinking obviously of like Fantastic Beasts now and how awesome, the creatures look like in that movie. And if you just imagine what they could do now to those aliens, it would just change dramatically. It would eliminate the cheese factor. And then, some of the dialogue probably needs improvement. Actually, like I don't know if it's the older brother or the younger brother. I don't know if it's David or Jeff. One of them calls the other retarded, which I'm like, that totally would not go over now. One thing that kind of just like jarringly stood out to me when I heard it, I was like, ooh. And also like the scene where, and I did love the brothers too, although like the kid that played little Jeff like was perfect. Like he was such an annoying little brat. So that was very realistic. But like the scene when they drop him off and to his friend's house or whatever, and he, says something, insults David. Like David's like says back to him, like, I'm gonna kill you or something like that. That was like really weird.
You'll never see your 9th birthday, I promise.
Yeah. It was like, it went really dark. I was like, my brother and I threatened one another growing up, but I don't remember like death threats at that age, but maybe we did. I don't know. So, but yeah, other than that, like, I feel like the core story still holds up. I don't really think you need to change the story much. For me, it just, like I said, some of the effects, some of the dialogue, the creatures, that's about it.
I could do without the booger monster, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that was pretty gross.
That's an easy one.
He has a cold.
He does.
Yeah. And they never name him. They just say a very unpleasant creature. Mm-hmm. He's got a cold.
I think for me, the challenge was always around the NASA time, because he's captured inside this room and it has this whole, something's talking to me, something's reaching out to me, trying to get me to come to it or whatever. And it was too easy, I think, in order for that to happen. I wanted there to be more mystery, more, science figuring out what's really going on kind of situation, like do a little more exploring around that potentially. It just seemed like it was a cheap plot in order to get him to just jump into Ralph and go for a drive very, very slowly across the base. Which, in that same vein, the Ralph going across the base, I thought was a little bit out there because no one's going to see this thing rolling along and, hey, that doesn't belong here. Like, we should go pick it up. It's just a robot. Turn it off. Yeah,
right. Like a dog comes up and sniffs it, and the guy's like, "No, you'll get your breakfast later."
It just did not work for me at all.
I totally love the music that's playing though while he's in Ralph,
Yep.
traveling. That music is so great. Did you also know the guy that did the musical score is Alan Silvestri, who did the music to Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, Avengers, Captain America? That was pretty crazy.
Yeah, the score itself was actually really good. It's the cheesy parts of the score, like using the Beach Boys song, which you had to throw in because it references David's time frame, so we get it, right? But the classic 80s synthesizer music, especially during the dog frisbee opening scene, watching that now, it's like, okay, that definitely has to get modernized. Because it was a long scene, and I think maybe for me that's why the dog thing is almost an annoyance, because it just goes on forever.
It is pretty long.
Yeah,
it is long.
I'll give that.
Yeah,
I got to tell you though, I know you're not a big fan of that Beach Boys song, Troy. I fell in love with the Beach Boys because of this movie, to the point that I got like a set of just that single when I was a kid and used to listen to it over and over and over again. I was so obsessed with it that my dad literally took me, because he took me to see the movie. He took me to see the Beach Boys when I was I don't know, 8 or 9 years old, or however long it was. And I specifically remember when that song came on, I was super excited. So that song has stuck with me to this day, and it's another good memory. So Scott, should the movie even be remade, or should it just be up there on a pedestal because you had so many good fond memories from it as you're growing up? This isn't one that is in no touch status by any means. Like Angela said, the story is just fine. It just needs that modern polish to it. I in a perfect world, I would want kind of what they did with Psycho, where they did like a shot by shot kind of remake thing. Maybe tweak some things here and there, but just make the same movie, but just with modern graphics and better actors. Nothing wrong with Joey Kramer too much, but and there's something about it being at NASA that didn't feel right. Like, would NASA do that, do you think? Or would that be like a secret government organization type thing? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that actually makes sense now that you say it.
It'd be like a SETI thing, wouldn't it? Not a NASA thing?
Yeah, but they'd still have to work out of somewhere, so maybe it's like a partnership. Their secret government agency is on the base of NASA, but just because that's where the resources are, computer-wise, et cetera, in order to do things they need to do from a research perspective. But yeah, maybe they're not NASA employees specifically.
Mm-hmm. Seriously, I just want this exact same story, almost identical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually the same way. Like I definitely think that this is something that should be remade. It was very important to like all three of us and to our siblings, or my mom, Scott's parents, like growing up. So there was something really special about the story for whatever reason. And I, as I said, I shared it with my niece and nephews and they loved it. Granted, this was 13, 14 years ago, but even back, 14 years ago, they still dug it. So I like the idea of kids having something like this. I mean, what was so great about it too is it's a boy. Like it's like Scott said, it's a 12-year-old boy. This is like, how awesome would it be to be a 12-year-old kid going on this adventure, being part of the spaceship, having all this information, and he saves himself. I mean, with the help of Max, but it's like, there's something really cool about that. So I don't think you really need to touch the story, but there's just some things we can modernize to make it appeal to kids today.
Well, with that, let's go ahead and take a listen to another clip from Flight of the Navigator.
Heartbeat coming through. Get away! Hi, I'm Carolyn McAdams. You gotta be real hungry after your trip, right? What is this thing? That's Ralph. Ralph? Mm-hmm. Robotic assistant labor facilitator. Actually, what he does here is he delivers mail and supplies, and he messes up a little bit every now and then. So, who did you murder to put here maximum security?
No one. I'm a national security secret.
Oh, well, in that case, I shouldn't be talking to you at all.
Wait a sec.
How come Starsky and Hutch isn't on? That show was canceled a long time ago. That was my favorite show. And what's this stuff? You've never seen a music video before?
I've been gone for 8 years.
Gone where? Outer space?
Could be.
You know something? You're a weird kid.
Me? I'm not the one with the purple hair.
All right, so here's what we know about the intended remake. In November 2012, it was revealed that director Colin Trevorrow had been hired by Disney to work on a new version of the 1986 film, in which a young boy disappears only to return home 8 years later without appearing to have aged at all. Sadly, it appears, though, that Colin Trevorrow himself said that the project probably would not be moving forward, at least not with him at the helm, potentially. Colin said that the movie was about brothers. Quoting Colin, "I remember what the themes of it were. Maybe we didn't change it enough. That movie didn't make a lot of money. It's something that we loved because we saw it at a certain time, but I found a lot of the elements in the movie to be pretty great. And we made it that we got off the planet a little bit, and we made it in a different scope. And in the end, it was about those brothers." Now, this was at a time that was prior to Disney owning the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Star Wars properties, so it just might have been put on the back burner because of those, but kids, we can only hope for a remake, and that's what we are going to do this evening. Now, since this is getting a remake, potentially, we want to make sure we tell Hollywood how to do it right. So the way this is going to happen is that all selections are settled by a best-of-3 vote, with each host receiving one cut per episode to be used when they are extremely passionate about their idea, which I'm sure Scott will be since he has such fond memories. So everybody's clear on the rules. We agree on 2 ideas. We move forward unless someone uses their cut. You guys ready to go? Compliance, indeed. Nice call. Nice call. All right. Who has the first idea they want to throw out?
I got an idea.
Shoot.
And I've never considered this until I rewatched it yesterday. I've actually watched it twice in the last 2 days. It's just, and I, not just because I had to, I genuinely wanted to. So one thing that I felt like never touched on, and this isn't having anything to do with the major setup for the plot, but it's something that I think needs to be added to the end. When David is at NASA and Sarah Jessica Parker's character is talking to him, and she makes this passing comment to him. She's like, "You know what? You're kind of cute. Has anybody ever told you that before?" And he's like, "Oh, just my mom, but I don't think that counts." And that's all that was ever said about it. And what I think needs to happen at the end of this movie is after everything is resolved and he goes back in time to his original parents at their original age, and then he goes and grows up. I think there needs to be a closing sequence where it's now 8 years in the future, and David is no longer 12 years old. He's 20 years old, and he tracks down Carolyn, and nothing develops in terms of like any extra story, but he just tracks her down and sees her, and introduces himself to her or something, and they share a look, and she does they have a conversation or something, and she does the same thing she did to him back when he was 12 years old, and realize that he's cute, but now it's legal. not that creepy. I don't mean that to sound like in a creepy way at all, but I think that there needs to be some mention of Carolyn again at the end of it. So that's my big thing that I think needs to change. What do you guys think about that?
I am right on board with you, only I had it in mine a little bit differently, because in that case it seems almost I want to say creeperish, but he's got some kind of upper hand knowledge that Carolyn doesn't have at that moment. So that almost seems a little bit stalkerish. So what I thought of doing was they do that whole where he gets home and he goes on the boat and they shoot off the fireworks at the end. But maybe there's like another boat that like pulls up next to him, and it just happens to be a younger version of Carolyn. And the only reason we know it's Carolyn is because she turns to him and says, "Hey, you're kind of cute." And then you're like, "Oh, that's Carolyn. Yeah, that'd be awesome."
Or she has some purple hair.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or like an affinity for purple or something like that. That's my favorite color.
Yeah, I think doing it that way would be easier, because then you have that budding relationship when they were kids, rather than having the upper hand when they're adults.
I like it.
I like that too.
Better.
It's cute.
Hey.
Angela, you got any ideas? I got another idea, but I don't want to talk too much.
Yeah, it's one thing I thought that would be kind of cool, because I don't, like we said, if we're going with it. I don't really want to change the story too much, but I think that they could amp up some of, like, because my favorite parts are the parts with him and Max, and with the way that how special effects are done now, they can do so much. I think it would be cool is if Max actually, David and Max returned all of the alien creatures together. Like, I actually want to see them like travel to the different planets. Like, maybe there's something where in order to, try to take David back in time, they've got to first like deliver the creatures that are on the ship first for whatever reason. So I actually want to see him go on an adventure, like a space adventure. So I want to see him actually visit and travel through space.
And that kind of works for me too, because the whole concept of, I don't know if we can take you back, Davey. I mean, it's really bad. It could be really hard on your system. We've never done it with humans before. It just seemed kind of a way to keep the plot moving more than it was actually spelled out for a way. So if they did this planet travel hopping thing, it might be a way for him to build up the tolerance to the process in order to make that happen potentially.
Mm-hmm.
I like that, which is really funny in the movie if you think about it, because he had this issue with traveling him back in time, but he had no issue with like potentially frying his brain doing the memory transfer.
Right.
You know what I mean? But all of a sudden now he's worried, which is kind of funny.
He just wants to hang out a little bit more. I think that's what it was. There was a little bit of a robotic bromance there, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Okay.
I like that a lot.
Little planet travel. And that kind of ties in with my idea because, as Colin said, when they were trying to look at this remake, it was really about Davey and Jeff and the brothers. And I really wanted to see a little bit of a switch. And maybe this is a little too Fantastic Beasts. But at the same time, I think it would have been great if when he does escape on the ship, that maybe he goes to some place that he and Jeff knew as kids, and he picks Jeff up, and Jeff joins him on the journey because they have to find all of the creatures because they escaped when he crashed into the power lines. And so they work on collecting all of the critters again, trying to avoid NASA along the way, and that gives us our kind of flight space sequence and fun. Granted, it takes away a little bit from the Max character, but I think it gives them kind of that bonding moment as brothers for when he gets back into the past, so he can appreciate his brother a little bit more with what he does in the future.
While we're spitballing here on that, why don't we throw in a little bit of a curveball? And instead of them being escaped from, on the planet, we somehow have Jeff involved from the get-go. And they have to, travel to deliver these animals back to their actual planets, which again is going to be an issue with the speed of light, where time slows down as you get close to the speed of light and all that. So the family initially is still getting used to David being 12 years old, even though he's supposed to be 20. And Jeff is 16 now. Then 12-year-old David and 16-year-old Jeff go off with Max to deliver this stuff, and they come back together, and now the family is having to deal with, now they've got 12-year-old David and 16-year-old, and it's like another 6 years later or something. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just trying to think.
Is that going to be too confusing?
Yeah, well, it doesn't. I don't think it's too confusing. I think it just depends on what's the motivation, and then what do the parents do? Like, are the parents aware of the time travel phenomenon, so when it happens again, it's not a big thing, or are they distraught because they just got David back, and all of a sudden, now David and Jeff are gone, and I can just see it go like the parents end up killing themselves. It just kind of gets a little dark, maybe.
Okay, yeah. Now we're getting a little non-Disney.
Right.
That's interesting. Well, let me throw one other idea out on here, and I'll be direct with you guys. I struggled coming up with another plot for this because I just like the original plot so much. I couldn't think of anything that really stood out. So what I'm going to give you, I don't think is fantastic, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, just because I'm hoping that it might spark something else within you guys just off the cuff that might make us better. So in the original, Max, crash lands into some power lines, and I didn't mention this in the things that didn't work for me. That just seemed like such a cop out to me. He's like this sophisticated spacecraft, and he can't see power lines.
Well, he was looking at
the
daisies.
Yes, but come on, that's a really.
How many
really
times have
cheap.
you glanced off to the left or the right while you're driving your car, and then been like, "Holy crap!" Slam on the brakes.
Yes, but I am a human. I'm not sophisticated at speaking 2 million forms of communication and traveling at all these speeds and basically multiple computers that are all running simultaneously. I mean, come on. So here's my thought. Instead of it bugged me too, I mentioned earlier about it being NASA instead of something like SETI. So what if instead of it taking place in Florida, it actually takes place, in Roswell? David and his family live around that area. They don't live on the base or anything like that, but they're like in one of the like a small little town, like on the outskirts or something. And David is kind of a rabble rouser, and he actually has figured out a way to somehow sneak into the facility on occasion just to check things out because he's obsessed with space travel and obsessed with the possibility of aliens and all this. And the government, Independence Day style, has recovered a spacecraft from the crash, back in the 50s, and have been housing it there since the 50s. And they've been, like Faraday is in the original movie, been trying to get into this thing and trying to understand what it is. And the whole time Max has been inside doing everything he can to keep them out. But when David comes into the picture, they're like right on the brink of it. They're about to crack into this thing. And like the night before they're about to uncover it, that's when David actually discovers the spacecraft. And he's geeking out because he's a kid and loves this stuff and thinks he's found something. So Max, in an act of desperation, which we find out later, decides this is the time he's going to transfer all his data into David because he doesn't want the government to get a hold of it. So his plan is to, get it from David at another point in time. So, electricity happens or whatever happens. David's knocked out. He wakes up and, goes home 8 years later like he did in the original movie. And now he's got the star charts in him. And the reason that it's been 8 years is because Max basically like kidnapped him like he did in the original, took him to Phelan. But here's the thing, is he gets to Phelan and goes to download this data. Again, this is all told throughout the movie. We don't actually see this. He takes him to Phelan to take this data that he needs on Phelan, but he can't access it for some reason. For whatever reason, he can't get into it. He can't, connect his Wi-Fi to David's brain or whatever. So he has to drop him back off, and he drops him back off at the facility again, but the government comes and they try to capture him again. So all he can really do is just dump David. And that's the point that David wakes up, not remembering any of that, wakes up, and now it's 8 years later and he's still 12 years old. And then we go through all that. So now we have David in the present day, and then it goes into explorer style, where he's starting to have these premonitions and these visions of all of this data that he's now got in his head, and he becomes obsessed with it and starts, putting it into his computer and recording all this data. So now this is why Max needs him, because he can't get it from his head. He has to get it from his computer, or he has to, get this stuff physically, like through a flash drive or something like that. Does any of that spark anything as far as recovering that information?
Angela, what do you think?
I don't really like the idea of him, I think, like sneaking into a facility or anything like that. I think I still like the idea of the original where, he's off in the woods or whatever, and, he falls and hits his head and he thinks he just like woke up. I don't know, there's something, I kind of like the simplicity of that part of it, because I think...
So do I.
So I kind of like that a little bit better. So yeah.
Like I said, I agree with you. This was a stretch. I was trying to come up with something and just trying to do some kind of twist on it. And I love the movie Explorer so much, and the idea of David, actually starting to see this stuff in his sleep or whatever, and trying to recreate it. I was trying to do some spin on that, and that's the best I could come up with. So you're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't like the idea. I was hoping it was going to spark some other kind of plot line with you guys.
It's not bad.
That might make it work.
One thing that I was thinking of, because there has to be I don't like the sneaking onto the base, like Angela said, but maybe there's a purpose for them to be on the base. So maybe, depending on the time period, and granted, we just had, the Kevin Costner movie with the ladies from NASA, right? The name of the movie slipping my mind right now.
Hidden Figures, not Hidden Fences.
Yes, Hidden Figures. But maybe it's like that. Maybe mom works on the base, and because they work on the base, they have, you can go certain areas of the base, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe the way we tie in the brother concept is, they're out, they happen to hear voices or something. There's some connection that's happening between something and David, and David's like, I got to figure out what this is. So the two brothers go together and go to try to figure out what it is. kind of like what Scott was saying, something happens, they're close to discovering the ship or whatever, and he passes out and wakes up and the ship is back and we don't see what all happened, but it's 8 years later or 12 years later or 16 years later, we can make up the number we want, to basically age his brother enough that his brother now works on the base as one of the scientists.
That's interesting.
And then that way, as the whole scientist and discovery and the download of the data and all of that happens, he realizes what happened, and he knows that his counterparts are going to study his brother and all this other stuff. So he's the one that actually helps break him out. And as they're breaking him out, it's actually potentially Carolyn or somebody like Carolyn is like the brother's girlfriend. And that's how they work that into the picture so that they get him to escape. And maybe all three of them go on the ship together and do these crazy things. And in order to get them home, one, they have to download the star charts, but in order to get the star charts, they basically have to go back in time step by step by step in order to return all the animals or whatever. And then it's actually when David's back in his own time, back at the beginning, that we actually see future brother Jeff and Carolyn have to leave in the spaceship to go back to the future, potentially. So it's almost like a reverse story.
I like it, but I think that takes if we have Carolyn's character be Jeff's love interest, then we take away from the thing that I like the most about our remake, in that David comes back and sees Carolyn
as a kid,
as a young girl, and that's how we close the movie. It's my fault for bringing this up, but I'm kind of with Angela that I just like how simplistic the story is. I love that they're not involved in the government and all. They're just regular old Joes. They're just nobodies that just get thrown into this thing. But I also like Angela's idea about actually it might have been both of yours together, about instead of traveling back in time right away, they have to go return these animals to kind of get him used to the travel so that they can actually make the big jump to put him back in time. Because, and this is one thing I didn't mention when we mentioned earlier about things that don't work. This movie is freaking short. It is. I am like shocked that like the movie's already over. I'm already in the finale when I get there. So what if we have the same setup and we do our little twist where he meets? Oh no, that's at the very end. Where instead of doing the time travel right away, they work up to it, deliver all these animals back, slowly, not at full light speed, and then do the time travel at the very end. That adds some runtime to our movie, and he gets to do a little bit more adventuring instead of it just being about running away from NASA and all this. And you got this own little extra adventure, and then we come back and do our. He successfully does the time travel, and then he meets Caroline when she's a kid too.
Yay! That's exactly what I wanted. That's my premise. I was like, I want it to be, and we didn't even discuss this, but I want it to still take place like in the same time frame too. I want it to be like in the 80s. And the reason why I think you can get away with that now is the 80s are cool again, like Stranger Things with the success of that. Like, I think that you could get away with citing this in the 80s, but still making it relevant for people today. So I think like I still want it to be like 1978 and 1986 because I think I like the throwback to NASA. So I still kind of want it to be NASA. I love like, I don't know, maybe that it's nostalgia, but like I still kind of like the idea of them going on NASA and seeing like, Ralph and things like that. I mean,
NASA
I want that,
like
but
more instantly recognizable than something like SETI. You say NASA to a kid, they know what NASA is. They don't know what the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
but I just wanted to like, to your point, it's a short movie, so that's what I was thinking. I'm like, you've got time to actually see him travel and do some cool things. So I think that would be cool. And then I think the ending needs to be amped up a little too, and maybe this will help with it, because when he actually finally does do the mind transfer, it's like it just doesn't seem like a big deal, even though he didn't want to do it because it could have killed him and all this different stuff. But in the actual scene when they do it, it's like, oh, okay, that's done.
Well, I think that was done for comedic effect because they wanted to show the difference of they were trying to tone that down to have that joke land when he first comes out as that 12-year-old kid as Max instead of the super serious one he was before.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Maybe not the mind transfer. The traveling back in time. I'm sorry. That
Oh,
the
yeah.
very end when he travels back in time. I just felt like, oh, okay. There wasn't really. It didn't feel dangerous, and it's like that should feel dangerous because that's the whole point. Like otherwise, he would have done it right away when he got him. And I also, to everybody's point too, it is kind of cheesy that he just crashed. Looking at daisies, I was thinking maybe it could get like struck by lightning or something like that. Like something like out of his control caused the ship to crash. So like I was like maybe like a lightning storm hit it or whatever.
Or maybe that's where you put in the deal where one of the Puckmarin escapes or something, and he's trying to track this thing down, and that's when he gets struck by lightning. You know what I mean? Instead of it being looking at flowers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because as he's time traveling back and forth, there is all that lightning that's in between those cloud sequences. So maybe it's that. Yeah, something happens inside the ship that distracts Max, and that's how he hits one of those lightning bolts and gets actually thrown to the future or whatever it is, wherever they land. 1986 in this case. And maybe that's how it happens, is that he literally does have the ability in order to get David home, but because of this incident that happens, it kind of thrusts him into the future instead. We don't have to worry about the whole solar years, how far away is Phelan. They don't have to actually go to this stupid planet in the first place because you never see it anyway. Yeah, it might just be something on that nature. As he's just jumping through time, something happens that kicks it out and his time circuits are fried kind of thing.
So I was just to say we pulled a full Back to the Future reference there. Yeah. He gets a letter, 100 years later. It says, "If you're reading this, I'm alive and well."
So it sounds like right now what we have is the opening pretty much stays the same. The between the brothers conflict kind of stays the same, and then the planet travel Fantastic Beasts part is what happens during the whole after they escape from NASA.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so the question then becomes is, do we want the brother involved on that journey or not?
I kind of don't want him on because I like the end because I like the idea of David in the future realizes how important his family is to him, and he, rebonds with his brother. Maybe he does something with the older Jeff, but I don't know if it necessarily they need to travel together. Because I love the part in the end when he's on the boat with him, and the little Puckerman pops out, and his little brother's like, oh, and he's just like, shh, and that's like, and now they've got that going forward. That's something he's going to share with his little brother. As proof of his adventures or whatever. I don't know.
Plus, you miss out on that super sweet moment where he comes back and he actually tells his brother that he loves him as a 12-year-old kid. You're going to miss out on that if they travel together, I think. Even though it would be in the future, technically, I guess.
And they're bonding.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe with future, maybe you could do something with future Jeff, a little bit more involved than just shooting off the fireworks or whatever. But
so that's why I was thinking that maybe older brother Jeff in 1986, he's working with NASA, and that's how they actually do the escape part a little bit more craftily. And then it's older Jeff that's actually traveling with him to deliver all the beasts, and that's why they were able to bond enough in order for David to realize how much he loves his brother when he goes back to younger Jeff at the end of the movie.
So what do you think about Jeff, after his brother is gone? Part of the reason that he decided to join NASA or whatever government agency that we decided to use for this film becomes somewhat of a conspiracy theorist. Like he believes that David was abducted by aliens or something, and he figures that the only way that he can get some answers is to legit get involved in NASA and learn how this stuff works and have an in that way.
Jeff is only 16 though. So I'm like, if he's working at NASA, I mean, he'd probably be like Carolyn, just like a volunteer, not a volunteer, but like a
part-time
peon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like doing stuff like that. He's not really a research scientist or anything like that. He's 16.
Right, but that'd be okay too, because he's on his way up trying to get to there by the time David gets back. And he's got more of an in than you or I would. You know what I mean? So he can get around to some places as a janitor or a Ralph facilitator or whatever he's got to do. And there could be some, he can help him get back in or something like that. Or I don't know.
I kind
Maybe
of
we're
like.
getting too complicated again.
No, I think I like that. So basically, the opening is the opening. Somehow, Jeff decides that his brother was abducted, so he works on getting some kind of science and NASA kind of thing. We can even advance the years. We can make him 24, let's say. It's like it's his internship in college, right? And Carolyn will be a college age as well, or what have you, or maybe she's just 18, 19, something like that, to make it the same, whatever time frame it would be from where David's age would be. And that's what Jeff helps him do the escape thing, not necessarily travels with him. So he's going to stay on the ground, kind of helping the family, but understanding what David's doing, what he has to do based on the research he's done. And then we do the Fantastic Beasts portion of the show, delivering all the animals back to the planets. And that's how we get to bond with Max and David. And maybe there's something that he tries to scan his brain initially for the star charts. And it's the fact that he's got all this other, 10-year-old crap, 12-year-old crap in his brain that blocks the star chart download, and instead Max gets it's almost like a computer virus kind of thing. And that's why Max becomes the 12-year-old kid, is because he downloads that instead of the star charts.
And all he gets in terms of star charts are enough of the star charts to do the return of the animals. Like, he can get back to those planets, but he can't get back to Phelan.
Correct. And then
that works.
And then as they go through that journey, then more and more of the tolerance for the time travel gets built up in David. Then they go back to the fireworks thing, say goodbye to the parents. He obviously goes back in time. We make that a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more, even though it was pretty intense when we were, 8 and 12 years old back then. But we make
that was super creepy. I mean, he was all of a sudden isolated. He was alone.
Yeah, and the whole red blood eye that Max has got going on.
It was creepy.
But we try to make that a little bit more dangerous. He's able to survive and gets back. And maybe it's because of that travel. As that travel's happening, that's where we can amp it up a little bit, and the star charts have to download at the same time they're traveling back in time. So it's almost like in order for David's brain to handle the time travel, it has to download the star charts simultaneously, kind of thing.
It has to reboot.
Yeah,
David's
exactly.
brain.
Exactly. And then he gets back, they do the boat thing, and they see Carolyn, and he says, "You're cute," and that's where the movie ends.
Yep.
She says you're cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After, of course, the brother sees the Puck Marin and they do the brother thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the question. Do we want to end on the Carolyn thing, or do we want to end on the brother thing? Because that kind of changes the tone of the movie depending on how we end, on which character we end with.
Well, it's hard to end it on... It's hard to not end it on the brother, because there's no way that David is not going to talk about that in the very near future. You can't have this little alien looking thing pop out of your backpack and then just tell him to be quiet and that's going to last for more than 10 minutes. You know what I mean?
Right.
Dude, what is that thing in your backpack? Let's have a conversation about that. No, we're just going to write letters in the sky with fire sparklers.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So maybe they're on the boat and they're kind of chit-chatting or whatever. The other boat pulls up, you get the Carolyn scene. And then as they get ready to shoot off the fireworks, the Puck Marin slips out, and that's when the brother looks at it and you get the shh, and then it cuts to black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Do we want Max doing a little send off in the sky, like he did the more you know symbol?
I enjoyed that.
See you later, Navigator.
I can go either way.
See you later, Navigator. Oh my gosh. That's the catchline for a new movie.
Now I'm torn, because I was really sold on fading to black after meeting Carolyn, and now I don't know. I don't know which is sweeter, because we didn't have that one to compare. We had the sweet moment with the brother, and even in this movie, they just kind of didn't. Jeff didn't say anything more on the spot.
I guess it depends on how much Carolyn has worked into the NASA pieces.
Yep. So do we want Jeff to even be the NASA thing? Do we want it still to be all about Carolyn? Because if Jeff's there, it's going to be more about the brothers than it is more about Carolyn. That's going to be the big question.
Oh, here's how you can do it. Okay. This is kind of reworking the whole thing. But what if Jeff isn't alive in the future? And that's why he realizes how much he misses his brother. So that's how you get the brother thing to play off in the end. And it is Carolyn that has to help him do everything in order to escape. So Carolyn could even go on the ship with him to do the Fantastic Beast part.
And that could even play into the family thing even more, because it could, Jeff's death could have been right after or right before David shows up. So the family just lost their second son only to get another one back.
I think that's too dark. I think we're going too dark if we kill, like, if one of their sons missing, presumed dead, and then we kill the other one. I think we've gone too dark. Plus, I like when he sees Jeff, and like the dynamic of your little brother being the big brother. You've got to keep that. That part's, I'm going to say cut. We're not killing Jeff.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So Jeff's in, which means we have to end on the brother then. So the way we work Carolyn in at the end is maybe as they're coming like down the boat dock or whatever to go to the boat, maybe the girls or whatever are coming the other way, and he like drops a box. She drops a box or something, and maybe it's a box with like purple hair ties or something. And then picks up the box. They kind of look at each other, and he's like, here you go. And she's like, oh, thanks. You're kind of cute. And then just keeps walking to the boat.
She can be like, she could just be like, I just moved here or whatever. My name's Carolyn and blah, blah, blah. And you're cute.
I don't even think she has to introduce her name. It's just kind of just a passing glance. And then one of the friends in the distance says, hey, Carolyn, let's go.
Exactly.
And then she's like, I got to go.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. And then we finish on the boat with the brother.
Yep.
Sweet. I think we got a movie.
Yay.
Woohoo.
I think we do too.
All right. So who's going to direct this bad boy?
Ooh, I got a good one. And it's funny because we've been talking about the movie, so I like my director choice. It's David Yates, who directed Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them and some of the Harry Potter movies. Just because I think he obviously knows how to work with kids, direct movies with kids. He knows how to direct movies for families. He knows fantasy, and he knows how to, work with CGI to have such amazing creatures. So I think that's my pick, David Yates.
It's not bad. Troy, do you have one?
I didn't have one on the top of my head. I could get behind David Yates. I think that would work.
Let me throw one at you before we settle on that. Joe Dante, who directed, as I mentioned earlier, Explorers. And he's actually done some TV episodes recently, which kind of did a tie-in with, how the director of Fly the Navigator was also the director of Starsky and Hutch. He's done an episode of MacGyver, and he's done several episodes of Hawaii Five-0. So Hawaii Five-0 could be the show that's referenced. Why isn't Hawaii Five-0 on anymore? That show was canceled years ago. Mm-hmm. Double up on that, too.
I mean, he's up there. Is he still working?
He's still doing TV shows.
I suppose.
I have no problem with David Yates though either. I just thrown out another option.
Joe Dante, I do clump him in with like those 80s nostalgia type films too. Obviously Gremlins and The Howling, etc., things of that nature. Mm-hmm. Man, that's a good call.
Well, you are the deciding vote, sir.
I'm gonna go.
Angela's already used her cut.
I'm gonna go with Yates.
Yay!
All right.
You could use your cut if you want and get Joe Dante in there, Scotty.
No, I don't want it that bad. I actually like the idea of Fantastic Beasts. If for nothing else, we're going to have our own little mini act of Fantastic Beasts in our movie, so that's fine.
Okay, so David Yates it is. So I think we just cast the two, right? Let's cast David, and do we cast the voice of Max?
Well, I think we want Paul Rubens, correct?
Yeah, I think that's just a given.
He's got to reprise his role?
Yeah,
totally.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think that's up for debate. I actually had a casting for David and Carolyn. I didn't go for Jeff, but
okay, let's go ahead and pick Carolyn then.
I did cast, I did the whole cast, guys. I'm not even kidding. I've got the parents, I've got Faraday.
So even though the format says we recast the two leads, you just decided to do the whole movie.
Did I? What format? Keep going.
That's right. This is an Aaron show this week. We're just doing it our own way.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think I have the perfect solution for David. Okay. I really do.
We'll see if you equal Angela's.
Oh, man. I think mine's really solid, and I think Angela will really like it a lot. Sean Giambrone, who plays Adam Goldberg in The Goldbergs. Now, we know him as being super goofy and quirky in that show. He's playing that character. But if you've seen that kid out of that character, I think he'd make a great David. If you go look on his IMDb page and see what he looks like without the glasses and the goofy 80s, the spiked hair or whatever, he's a good-looking kid. I want to see that. And with it being an 80s, we're going to go with the 80s. He's going to be a perfect fit for that because he obviously loves the 80s. So I think that would be a good call. Thoughts?
I'm with you there. But I want to hear what Angela had.
I have a better one. I think, and not that, like I tried really hard not to like just pick everybody from Stranger Things, because obviously that would be the easy thing to do. But I really think Finn Wolfhard, which first of all, that's the coolest name ever, Finn Wolfhard. But the kid that plays Mikey from Stranger Things, like he totally fits exactly like what I want this 12-year-old kid to look like. And, he's nerdy and he's quirky. And, he's humorous, and he can see him going on an adventure. So that's the way I went. I'm not really familiar with that other kid because I don't watch that show. He's 17, so I worry about him being a little too old to play a 12-year-old.
He looks 12.
Yeah. So, but that would be my choice. The kid, Mike from Stranger Things, Finn Wolfhard. So I guess it's going to be up to you, Troy.
Finn does kind of look like him a little bit too.
He does. But given that I have some prior knowledge of other Remake This Movie Right episodes, and we might see him in some of our other properties and we don't want to overwork him, I'm going to have to go with Sean, because Finn's already cast in something else.
We can do what we want.
Yeah, I want Sean. I like Sean. Sean's fun. He's just a funny character.
Okay.
So yes.
Did you have one for Carolyn, Troy?
I did not cast Carolyn, so I'll if you got one, throw it out there.
Well, Angela, I went first last time. Who do you have for Carolyn?
I have Haley Steinfeld.
Oh.
The girl from Edge of 17 and the newest Pitch Perfect. I thought she'd be cool. I think because Sarah Jessica Parker was really, she was cute. She was sweet, like funny, awkward 80s girl. And like, I just want like that kind of like that wholesome feel to it. And I think Haley has that face that, I don't know, that's cute, that you would, a 12-year-old boy would totally crush on right away. And she's a good actress. So
I went with Emmy Rossum, who plays Fiona in Shameless. Have you guys seen that show?
Yes, I looked at her, but again, she's kind of old too. She's approaching 30.
Is she really?
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay.
So I was literally just, I looked at her, believe me, I was struggling because again, I cast everybody because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. So she is 30. So, granted, 30 doesn't, they could play whatever, but we're wanting her to be playing like 20. So.
Right.
But again, I guess it's up to Troy.
I'm good with Haley, but I looking at it from that looking at it from the perspective though with Emmy Rossum, right? So if you got Sean now, right? So he's like 17, 18 in real life. Is he too close to Haley's age at age 20? Would there be enough? Would you be able to tell the difference between them enough that there would be enough of a gap?
Probably not. Finn Wolfhard. It's supposed to really look like a 12-year-old boy. That's the whole thing. We want a big, to everybody's point, there's a noticeable age difference between, Carolyn and David in the future. So.
But would there be a noticeable difference between Sean Giambroni and Emmy Rossum?
Yes. I think so.
All
right, Emmy Rossum it is.
I should have saved my cut.
Yes, you should have. you and your love of Fantastic Beasts and all things Harry Potter.
Right, but you got David Yates, so there you go. All right, so David Yates directing. Paul Rubens reprises his role. We got Sean from the Goldbergs and Emmy Rossum as Carolyn. I think we have a movie.
Can I say who I picked for the parents?
For sure.
And for Faraday. So for the parents, I picked, because again, I was picking parents who could potentially look like Finn Wolfhard. So I picked Paul Rudd and Amy Adams as the parents.
Oh, good call.
I like it.
And then for Faraday, I picked Bryan Cranston.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
It would be, yeah. I like it.
Yep.
That's good. That is really good. Nice job.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, so in our movie also, we talked about some nostalgic moments. These can be subtle or, of course, right there smack in your face. Clearly, we have to have the robotic assistant labor facilitator, since we've already discussed that in depth this evening. The Puck Marin has to be in there. We have to have the Frisbee dogs with equally cheesy music at some point. Max freaking out at a little kid, which I think we're going to have as well. The officer has to push the spaceship, or someone has to push the spaceship to show how it moves. Of course, the compliance line from Max. And I guess we could maybe roll the credits to I Get Around for the fun of it. Just for Scott.
There you go. Well, and just to play devil's advocate for a minute, because I know I'm going to get yelled at if we don't do this, I think the point of the nostalgic moments being, originally he has it no more than 5, is because it's supposed to be a way for us to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 how nostalgic or memorable this movie is for us.
Well, it's clearly an 8, so there.
Aaron let us do this on without him, so...
Right. It's an 8 out of 5.
I'm flying this ship this week. 8 out of 5.
We are the navigators.
That's right.
Of this show.
With that, let's go ahead and listen to our final clip here from Flight of the Navigator.
Will this hurt?
You will feel nothing.
Will I remember everything?
You will retain all data.
How many times have you done this thing?
0.
0? You mean never? I'm not gonna let you try this out on me. What if you fry my brain?
I will not fry your brain.
How do you know?
I have been programmed with superior intelligence. Lie down.
Okay. That's it?
That's it, Davy.
Davy?
If you want to learn to swim, you've got to jump in the water.
Don't forget to feed Bruiser. 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun.
Whoa! This can't be happening. I think I've gotten some stuff out of your head that has nothing to do with navigating this ship.
You sound just like a human.
No! That dumb dog will never learn to catch a
Frisbee, you are an inferior species, you dumb dork.
Butt face.
Scuzz bucket.
Hey, well if you're so perfect, what are you still doing here?
I told you, I blew a fuse when I totaled out that electrical tower. I was checking out some daisies.
Crashed while looking at flowers?
Ha!
Sounds like you're the inferior species.
I'll show you who's inferior. Heads up!
All right, so how do you think we did? Of course, if you have your own remake and you think that it could be better, go ahead. You can email us at remakethismovie@gmail.com. Or, of course, head on over to the Remake This Movie Right Facebook group and leave your thoughts and personal memories on the film there as well. With that, we have come to the end of the episode where we do our final pitch, brought to you, of course, by one Mr. Wayne Henderson from MediaVoiceovers.com. If you need a voiceover talent for any of your work, you can check him out at MediaVoiceovers.com. With that, Wayne, take it away.
Attention. Sit down, navigators, and get ready to experience the science fiction voyage of the year with me, Matt. I'm a sentient spacecraft from the planet Phalon, traveling through space-time to collect specimens for study. A young boy, David, one of you humans, was part of my study, but things went haywire on our trip back to Earth and I crashed. Now I can't find David anywhere because some geeks over at NASA captured my ship and are now doing their own research on me. Poor Davy. His family is probably freaking out because to them he has been gone for 8 years and he looks like he hasn't aged at all. Luckily, David's now older brother Jeff works for NASA, and he, along with a pretty young NASA intern, Carolyn, can help David get back to me so I can download the information I need to get David back to his own time and me to home. Join Sean Gambroni as David, Emmy Rossum as Carolyn, and me, Max. Well, not me. Actually, it's Paul Rubens. You know, the guy that played Pee-wee and did this character the last time the film was made. Anyways, join us as we take an expanded adventure of experimental proportions in David Yates's Flight of the Navigator.
See you later, Navigator!
Amazing job as always, Wayne. Woo!
Awesome, Wayne. Nice job, man.
I want to go to the stars. I'm going to travel through time. This
Navigators, mound up.
So much fun. I don't leak, you leak. All right. Well, we've come to the end here, guys. Thanks so much for being here. It was a fantastic time. Final thoughts there, Angela. Where can people find you?
They can find me in the Hollywood Outsider group. I'm always on there chatting with my fellow hoes.
That sounds so wrong in so many ways.
I know.
What about you there, Scotty?
Well, if you're a fan of Flight of the Navigator, I have to imagine at some point in your life you played some video games. And if you have, you want to check out my podcast, The Gaming Outsider, which is a sister podcast to The Hollywood Outsider. And we talk about video games and do some news, games we've been playing, and always have a community topic. You can check that out at thegamingoutsider.com or our Twitter handle, which is @thegocast. And we've also got a Facebook group, too. Lots of good conversations going on over there. So be sure to check us out.
And, of course, make sure you listen to the sister podcast, as Scott mentioned, The Hollywood Outsider at thehollywoodoutsider.com. I am Troy Heinrichs, and you can catch me talking about the NBC television show The Blacklist with Aaron, who will be back next time over at theblacklistexposed.com, as well as the soon-to-hopefully-be, by the time you listen to this, Super Bowl champion Green Bay Packers over at thepackersfanpodcast.com. Don't know if we won, lost, or whatever by the time this airs, but hey, it was a really fantastic end to a fun season. So again, packersfanpodcast.com. Also remember to email us at remakethismovieright@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at remakeright. You can, of course, get all of our back catalog and episodes at remakethismovieright.com. And, of course, share this episode when it comes out as you're listening to it to all your friends on social media, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, etc. Make sure you let them know how much fun Flight of the Navigator is and how much you really want this movie to be remade. With that, the credits have rolled on this remake. Thanks so much, Angela.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.
You bet. Thanks so much, Scott.
Compliance.
Compliance.
And be sure to come back for our next remake, because remember, the next movie you watch will get a remake someday, and together we can remake this movie right.